everyone. We are back here on the Newsfloor, and I'm your host, Valerie Lee. As usual, this episode, we're going to get into all the good stuff, the conversations, the news, the controversies that are happening this week, some new tunes, and of course, interviews with your favorite people from in and around the world of rave. So, this week, there is a lot on my mind, actually. I was actually spending a lot of this week thinking about how we are now in December, which means that we are very, very close to the end of 2020. It's been a super challenging year for all of us, I think, for various different reasons, but especially for us and what we've largely been talking about for so long here on the Newsfloor related to the nightlife industry, the music industry. But we're almost at the end. I think 2021 is looking towards being a much better year if things go according to plan, fingers crossed. So, I don't know. Some positive. We're not quite there yet, but it's nice to see it in the horizon. But anyways, for this week, it's going to be a good episode. We are talking about the big news, which is the Grammys just released their nominations, and it is always a controversial point for everyone in the music industry, but definitely for the dance music industry specifically. But I think they got a lot of things right this year, so we're going to talk about that. We have new music from Jaden Thompson, who is an awesome up-and-comer in the tech house space. New from Richie Houghton, who is not an up-and-comer, but a fantastic legend that we so rarely hear from nowadays, which is going to be really great to get into. And our friends Walker and Royce. And of course, an interview with an organization that I think is so important, the Association for Electronic Music, AFEM. And we are going to be talking about a variety of different topics that are super important, some of which we've talked about a lot. The most pertinent being last week when we talked about the news that the organization had actually created a code of conduct to fight against sexual harassment that has been rampant in many ways in the dance music industry. So we're going to talk about all of that. It's going to be a really interesting interview, so stick around. This is the Newsfloor. Okay, let's waste no time and get straight into the juicy details of the news this week, which of course, as I mentioned, are the Grammy nominations. Always sort of dramatic. People always have different opinions. Of course, music's subjective, so it's hard to get it all right. But I do think that after a long history of consistently doing dance music kind of wrong in the Grammys, they have finally done it right this year. So for those who might not be as familiar, the Grammys have definitely a difficult relationship with dance music. Traditionally, the dance categories, one, they're never aired live on live television, which is unfortunate, and I hope that will change someday soon. But the categories themselves have always been kind of muddled with dance-leaning pop music that was definitely more pop than it was dance music categorically. So you think of names like Madonna or even Lady Gaga. And my favorite is always the Baha Men's Who Let the Dogs Out, which actually won the category for dance music in 2001, which is pretty crazy to think about. But this year, I think the Recording Academy got it right. They did this year's releases justice, and there were some really good releases, so I'm so happy that they were acknowledged in this way. So a couple of the big highlights, first-time nominees this year that are a couple of names that are not new by any means, but, you know, better late than never for them to kind of finally receive their recognition. Bauer being one of them, Kaytranada, Madeon, and Arca. And speaking of Arca and Kaytranada, they kind of represent some of the more diverse, inclusive nominees that the Grammys decided to bring in this year. Kaytranada and Arca definitely represent the queer identity, and Jada G is one of the nominees for Best Dance Recording for her track Both of Us, which is one of my personal favorites, so I'm so glad to see her on there. Outside of the actual traditional dance and electronic categories, Flying Lotus got a much-deserved Producer of the Year nomination. Beretta from the Glitch Mob, shout out Beretta, actually was nominated for Best New Age Album for Formless, which is an album that he made as Superposition, a group with Matthew Davis. And Kaytranada actually got the nod for Best New Artist, which is really funny because most Kaytranada fans will know that his big release actually came out maybe 5 years ago. So a bit weird to see him nominated as Best New Artist, but like I keep saying, better late than never. The Best Dance Recording category is going to be a really good one. Like I mentioned, Both of Us, Jada G, Flume with The Difference, Disclosure, My High. I think anytime Disclosure releases a new album or really anything, they always get nominated for the Grammys, but they are super deserving of it. They're so talented, and the album Energy was fantastic. Kaytranada's 10%, Diplo and Side Pieces on My Mind. So a bit diverse and some really good tracks, honestly. Best Dance Electronic Album from Arca, Kick Eye, Bauer, Planets Mad. Shout out to Holly, who's the producer on that. Disclosure's Energy, like I mentioned, fantastic album. And Kaytranada's Bubba. And Madion's Good Faith. So like I mentioned, really good artists this year for the Grammy noms, so keep an eye out for when those come out. It'll be really fun to watch the awards ceremony this year. In other news, this one's definitely a bit tough to talk about. This happened last week. A producer known as I.O., spelled I_O, passed away. His real name was Garrett Lockhart. He was 30 years old, and the reason why this is, in some ways a bit more tough than other news that I've reported before about death is because he was based in LA. I knew him personally. A lot of us here in LA who work in the music industry knew him, and many of us were close with him. He was a super talented person. He had found some really incredible success in recent years with his project I.O. I think all of us will really fondly remember not only his music, but the shows he played, the energy he shared. He first started I.O. in December of 2017 and rose really quickly, had big releases on Mousetrap, Armada. If you haven't heard them, I really encourage you to. I think he was one of those rare kind of artists who wasn't afraid to do something a little bit different, and he was playing, really intense techno on the main stage of big festivals where they had never really had that before. And he kind of managed to cross the boundaries, the genre boundaries in that way. Deadmau5 was a big inspiration of his and actually a big fan of his. He was a big supporter, not only on the label, but on shows that he had him open for as well. And yeah, I think the entire music industry has been hurting. If you've been on Twitter, you've seen a couple of the tweets, the condolences, the memories that people have been sharing. Mousetrap, the label, released a statement to Billboard that said, "We will never forget so many iconic moments with our beloved friend Garrett. There are too many to count. He was family and an integral part of Mousetrap history through his many record releases, events, and tours. His approach to genre and music started a movement and was unprecedented. Garrett was a kind and loving friend with an incredible vision for his project and a true artist of his generation. He will never be forgotten and will always be with us on the dance floor." So please go listen to I.O.'s music if you haven't. We did really lose a good one, and it's going to be tough for a little bit for a lot of artists and friends of his. My condolences definitely go out to his family, his friends, and his loved ones. So that's the news for this week on the dance floor. Every single week, more streams from our friends at Stream Informer. I tell you every single week to go follow them. If you haven't done it by now, you are truly missing out. They're on Instagram, they have a newsletter, and they do daily roundups of the best streams. But of course, they join me here on the Newsfloor and they hand over some of their top picks. So if you missed it last week, there is a brand new streaming platform called United We Stream, and a highlight of it from last week was the Art Concert, ARTE, which delivered a string of streams from some awesome names: Virginia, Ryan Elliott, Call Super, Rebecca. Familiar names, really great talents from the underground side of things. The standout set came from the artist name, I never know how to pronounce it, so I just spell it out. It's FJAK. However you pronounce it, you know who I'm talking about. They're fantastic. They're so good. The set was really fun. It was ravey and it was high energy, so you can watch that back on the YouTube channel if you didn't catch that. And this week, we are looking forward to streams, a couple really high energy streams, honestly. We are starting the weekend off on a good foot. Friday, December 4th, techno titan Marcel Fangler is taking over the HOR Berlin page. That is, of course, a Stream Informer favorite. That happens at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And later on, New York-based Kush Jones is on the Elseworld TV Twitch page, which is Elsewhere, the Brooklyn Club's page on Twitch. And that's going to be a really fun set full of jungle and footwork and, kind of hitting that 160 BPM mark. So 2 really solid choices. Go check them out and follow Stream Informer for more. We're at the Hub, and now we're going to listen to some really solid new tracks and new releases this week. As usual, there's always a good solid showing of good tracks, and this week is no exception. We're going to start with the Beatport number 1, which this week is from Late Replies. It's called Hold Up, and you'll see in a little bit why it's called that. It's from the London duo called Late Replies. They've released this on Solardo's Sola label, and it's honestly just some really fun tech house, some no-nonsense tech house, and you will immediately recognize the sample, the familiar and iconic soundbite from Dr. Dre's The Next Episode with Snoop Dogg, hence the title. So let's take a listen to Hold Up right now.
Hold up, wait, woman, we thinking we soft, we don't play. We gon' rock it till the wheels fall off. Hold up, wait, woman, too be acting too bold. Take a seat. Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hold up, wait up,
Pete Tong's essential new tune, the incredible Jaden Thompson has offered up a track named Closer. I have been a fan of Jaden Thompson's for a long time. I actually met him, I want to say maybe 2 years ago in Ibiza at the Martinez Brothers show at DC10, and he is such a charming young guy and also so talented, making some really fun dance floor ready tech house. And this new one comes from the Boogeyman compilation, which is out now. The Boogeyman is a brand and a new sublabel from the Martinez Brothers' legendary Cut and Heads label. It features Joey Daniel and the brothers themselves, and then of course Jaden Thompson. So he has had some really solid recognition already. Danny Howard chose him as a future Fire artist for 2020, and someone who Pete Tong has actually supported from day one. So this is Closer from Jaden Thompson. For the Newsfloor this is the Newsfloor pick of the week, I should say. Richie Houghton has finally released a new EP. It's called Time Warps, and it is out on the new imprint From Our Minds. This is a 2-track release that marks his very first dance floor focused EP since 1999, which that was the release of Minus Orange on +8. So it's been a while since we've had something so club focused from Richie, and as you can imagine, the title track of Time Warps is as energetic as you want it to be. It is sort of that signature techno, amazing Richie Houghton style. It's progressive. It creates that tension that I would love to hear on an actual dance floor. So hopefully we'll be able to hear it in 2021. It's super fun, and the other track is also really great. But this one actually comes with a music video that he created with his longtime collaborator, Barbara Klein, and it definitely captures the vibe. So let's check it out now. last but certainly not least, the Newsfloor pick of the week. We are inviting our friends Walker and Royce to come on and talk about their new track, Need to Freak. If you don't know Walker and Royce, it is not too late, but you are definitely a little bit behind. They are Dirty Bird stars. Incredible. They run a fantastic Twitch channel also called Good TV. Go check it out if you haven't. But with no further ado, let's hear straight from Walker and Royce.
Hey everybody, it's Gavin from Walker and Royce, here to talk about our track Need to Freak that comes out Friday on Dirty Bird. Really excited about it. Definitely is a reflection of our mood in 2020. It's definitely, it's a little bit moodier, a little bit chiller than the normal stuff we do, maybe a little bit more serious, but the message is that, we will get through this. We got to stick together and don't let anything get you down, and wherever you are, never stop dancing. And we're also going to have a really cool video directed by Stevie B, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Track's out Friday. Thanks for picking it as track of the week.
Around the world, in my club, in my class, with my friends. Around the world, around the world, around the world, around the world. Around the world, around the world, around the world, around the world, around the world.
In my flat, in my class, with my friends. Around the world, in my flat, in my class, with my friends. I will never stop dancing.
I'm excited to welcome not one, not two, but three special guests from the Association for Electronic Music, which is known as AFEM. Greg Marshall, Goli Gavami, Tristan Hunt. If you're not familiar with AFEM, I really encourage you to go check out their mission, go learn about them, and keep an eye out for them, because I bet you that you will start noticing their name popping up more and more, especially if you work in the music industry or are a deep, passionate fan and follower. The broad scope of it is that they are a voice for the global electronic music industry. They represent the community, the culture, and the commerce, so all sorts of facets of the industry. And honestly, they are the ones that are putting their heads together, putting their experience together, and doing proactive things to address many of the conversations and controversies that you and I are discussing as people who work in the music industry or fans of it. So that can range from the conversation around equality and representation, transparency around the economic side of the music industry, more recently mental health, and of course the pandemic and COVID-19 and how venues and much of the nightlife industry is able to get through this crazy, unprecedented time. So obviously a couple of really important topics, and I was really happy to have all three of them join me to address three different topics that are super relevant currently, and I think will continue to be relevant as we get through the end of 2020 and into 2021. So without further ado, let's get right into the conversation with the Association for Electronic Music. Hi all, how are you all doing?
Hi.
It's so good to have you all. Of course, you are the team, part of the team, I should say, that makes up AFEM. And I would love for you guys to actually start and introduce yourselves and your various titles before we get going.
Cool. I'll go first. I'm Greg Marshall. I'm General Manager of AFEM.
My name is Golchak Avami. Everyone knows me as Goli. I'm Regional Manager at AFEM.
I'm Tristan Hunt, also Regional Manager at AFEM.
So I'm excited to have you guys on because on the Newsfloor, we really like to make time and make space for conversations that are super important for the music industry and, therefore fans overall as well. And I couldn't think of a better organization to have on, especially at a time like this where every single week we're talking about new incidences and new events that are happening specifically related to the COVID pandemic and the nightlife industry, but also more recently, we've had a lot of conversation around, sexual harassment and how that affects different characters and people within our industry as well. And I know that you all are actually doing quite a bit of really important work relating to all of the above subjects and more. So Greg, I'd love to start with you. The Association for Electronic Music, the recent news that we actually talked about here on the show recently as well was that you guys published this code of conduct that is meant to prevent sexual harassment and gender discrimination in the dance music industry. I think it's super easy to understand why something like this should be created. Obviously, it's overdue, so I'm glad that we have something like this now. But I'd love to hear from you. Talk to me about how you actually see this code of conduct playing out in real life and throughout the industry.
Sure, and good question. I think potentially to answer it properly, it makes sense to very briefly touch on what the Code of Conduct covers. So, a key purpose is to increase awareness and understanding about what constitutes sexual harassment and discrimination. So, clear definitions. And just through that point alone, I think that will hopefully we'll see people reflect on their own behavior and the behavior of others in their company, in their sphere of influence, in their peer group, and whether discussions or adjustments or actions are needed. It provides guidance for employers, for artists and their representatives, and their responsibilities. And there's a simple mantra of stop, support, report. So, intervene to stop conduct when we can, support those who speak up, and report the conduct in accordance with the wishes of the victim. And there's also a specific support advice option in there. So AFEM sponsors a helpline, a sexual harassment helpline, which is run by Health Assured, where experts will listen and support and provide advice to those affected. So I guess, to answer the question, we hope this will play out to positively influence attitudes and behaviors in the scene, to help create an environment where there's greater understanding of what sexual harassment and gender discrimination is, and for it just not to be tolerated. I think through publicizing a code like this, even if just a few companies deploy a reporting mechanism for discrimination and harassment in their companies when they previously hadn't had one, or if a few individuals reflect on their behavior and then sort of adjust that, self-reflect and adjust that going forward. But I guess most importantly, if even just one victim of sexual harassment or assault decides to speak up and finds a more supportive environment when they do so, then the code will have served its purpose. Obviously, we hope it will be a much broader impact than that. And with the media uptake so far, I suspect it will be a much broader impact than that as we go forward.
Yeah, I thought it was really important that you all pointed out as an organization that a lot of companies or individuals in dance music operate very individually and often don't have a guideline like this to refer to. So even just having that action point, I think will be a great step forward. Goli, I'd love to move over to you. Another sector and another part of dance music that we could not ignore this year was the way that COVID-19 has affected, the entire industry, specifically the live side, venues, and related to all the shutdowns. No matter where you are in the world, pretty much you're affected by it. So there have been various attempts at finding a sustainable way to keep the business alive. We've all seen the different variations of it. There's drive-in shows, two-part testing, pivoting to live streaming. I'm curious to know, as AFEM, what are you guys doing or finding in regards to how to safely reopen clubs or move forward in that way?
Well, there's so much to talk about on this topic, but I'll try to keep it short. We're basically recommending clubs mostly to definitely reduce their operating costs and make sure they plan their finances and workforce and prepare for worst case scenario. Then we definitely encourage clubs to become part of venue-specific trade bodies just so that they can, find out about the latest in legislation that's happening and be able to apply for funding or support from government. These laws are always changing at the moment. There's I live in Berlin, and there's new plans and new laws every week. Some clubs are able to use their spaces and pivot into a short-term repurposing, for instance. We have a couple of instances that come to mind, or Berghain repurposed into an art gallery and an ongoing exhibition. And then there's Village Underground in London that was able to repurpose into a cycle club. And then, there's, we encourage crowdfunding as well. Clubs should activate their crowd base to crowdfund. We just recently supported the launch of, we partnered up with TicketSwap to support the launch of Local Legends, which is basically what they're doing is they're trying to come up with new ways of fundraising to activate the local community and show people what they would be missing if that club didn't exist anymore. And then last but not least, obviously, is definitely keeping an eye on how to reopen safely. A lot of different clubs in different cities in Europe are talking to their governments about safe gatherings and test events. And although nothing has been able to be set up as of now because we're in lockdown, there are a lot of conversations that are ongoing. And we just encourage, our role is to gather intelligence and share it with everyone, across territories. And we hope we're being successful in doing that at the moment.
That's great. And I know I could probably have you on to talk about that solely for an hour, maybe even more. I'm sure there's so much to dive into on that side. If I was a venue owner who hasn't been in touch with AFEM, are there resources that I should run to right now to go get in touch with you guys or keep up with what you guys are putting out?
We're planning on, we've been meaning to share the information around the test events for quite a while now, but there's nothing that we can share officially, but hopefully very soon. After lockdown is over, we've had some confirmations on being able to share detailed plans on what governments are allowing. So just to encourage other countries and cities and different places to go and force for this, push their governments for the same type of test events and so on.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely super important work. So we'll keep an eye out for more updates from you guys on that end as well. And then last but not least, Tristan, I am so glad you're on here because pre-pandemic, I think our industry was at this, in a way, a really great place where we were, focused so heavily on preserving mental health and sustainability within the industry. And even though obviously this year has kind of had its own array of problems, I feel like those are still subjects that are worth paying attention to and cultivating during this time when we're all at home and, looking for ways to be proactive. So question for you, if things went back to quote unquote normal tomorrow, I would be so curious to know what AFEM's next steps would be in regards to those subjects.
It's such a good question, and you're so right. The industry momentum that we had pre-pandemic was fantastic. We'd seen this shift over the last 3 or 4 years to major conferences all having mental health as keynote subjects. We've actually seen that cut across through the pandemic, which has been wonderful. So conferences that have moved online, such as ADE the other day, have moved their mental health contributions to that space. We've provided a mental health panel for them recently. So I think seeing that continuation of support for the subject, both through the pandemic, which obviously a lot of people, they felt things like isolation and loneliness and existing mental health conditions like depression and anxiety have in some cases been exacerbated, that's increased in some cases. The focus needs to maintain and continue through beyond the pandemic. Beatport did an amazing piece recently in terms of their Reconnect series where they were looking at different people within that, whether it was artists or it was mental health practitioners actually offering advice to their community. And I think we've seen that more across the whole sort of electronic music forum really is different businesses offering help and support and advice to people both in their offices and their firms. So really seeing that continue beyond the pandemic is something that we're pushing for as much as possible.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's hard to imagine life going back to normal, but I think it's definitely says enough, I think, this year that we were already focusing on mental health, and it obviously was quite important this year as well. Well, I'm so glad to have you all on. It's obvious to me that that Afem is doing some really important work, and we will be sure to keep an eye out for updates from you guys in the future. But thank you for joining me on the Newsfloor today.
Thanks very much for having us.
Take care.
Great.
It's that time again for me to tell you we have reached the end of another episode of the Newsfloor. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around, especially if you are a subscriber or a follower, whatever you might be. You are awesome. If you haven't joined us already, we're at the Newsfloor on the social channels on Instagram and Twitter. I am always hanging around over there. And if you are in the US of A, I hope you are gearing up for a quiet, safe, nice meal. However you celebrate or don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Hope you stay safe and enjoy some of the streams that I highlighted, because of course we are going to be inside this week and there is so much programming, so much good content going on to help us pass the time. Other than that, I hope everyone stays healthy and stays safe, and I will see you next week for another episode of the Newsfloor.